This week, we're going to be taking a look at lighting in Vectorworks for the first time. You can all find on our web courses this base file. It's called Dr. Ruth Ground Plan. This will be the one that we're going to be building up and working on together. So go ahead and download that. And then once you have it downloaded and open, don't forget to file and save this as your project. So in this case, my name, project, we're up to 11 now. I'm going to say save. Built into this file are a couple of things to point out before we really get started. In your resource manager, there are now two additional folders, one that is titled accessories and one that is titled lights. Just like when you insert things like furniture, the resource manager is going to be the place that you go to insert lights primarily. We'll go through how to do that here in a second. The other things we want to go ahead and set up have to do with Spotlight specific preferences and things that are just going to help you with lighting drafting in general. My recommendation is that under Tools, Options, and Vectorworks Preferences, that you disable offset duplications. The reason for that is many times you end up with pipes full of lights that are the same type, or it's very quick and easy to change lighting types as you're drafting. It's almost easier to keep the offset duplications off, so that way you can duplicate a light in place and then just move it. Especially if you know, oh, this one light just needs to move about 3 feet. We'll kind of go through those use cases here in a second, but that's how I will work a lot of times. The other thing we're going to check is Spotlight specific preferences. So we're going to go to File, Document Settings, Spotlight Preferences. And in particular, we're going to be looking at the tab that says under lighting devices that says parameters. So parameters is this file structure basically dictates what you see when you select a lighting object in your object info palette. As you can see, there's quite a few of things that are by default turned on. We don't need all of those. So here is a list of the ones that you actually need. You're going to disable the ones without check marks next to them by clicking in the column that says show in shape pane and click on that check mark to deselect it. And once you're done, say OK. So now we're ready to start laying in actually lighting stuff into this ground plan. First, we want to go ahead and create ourselves a couple new layers to start with. So you can do this either by selecting one of your layers and saying new to add one on top, or you can do it from this navigation tab and say new design layer. We're going to call this plot. Make sure you change your scale to 1/2 inch. We're going to work in 1/2 inch scale for all of this. And the other new design layer we want to create is called deck. The reason why we're going to have two different design layers is some things with lighting go overhead of the actors and of the space that are hung on pipes above. And then there are other things that need to get placed actually on the physical deck of the stage instead. So when you're all said and done, you want a new design layer that's called plot. That's number 1 in your hierarchy. A design layer called deck. That's number 2 in your hierarchy. And then we want to go ahead and turn the visibility of the scenery to gray. Because we're working with lighting now, it's important to see where the scenery pieces are and what they are and kind of their general shape. But we want them to start drawing less focus as we start working. It's just going to kind of help keep it all clean and neat for us. So also on web courses, there is a PDF of the lighting pipes for the space. A lot of times theaters will provide this for you. In this case, we're going to also be looking at how to draw them in ourselves, just because it's good practice to understand how to turn basically a basic rectangle that a theater sends you into something that Vectorworks recognizes as an actual lighting pipe. And it can give you a lot of really useful 3D tools as well. So we want to go ahead and build these correctly. So we're going to start all the way up stage, and I've given you dimensions both from the distance to the back wall, or the distance from the audience wall to the center of the pipe, and then also as well from the total length of the pipe, and then a distance from the center line to one edge of the pipe. This space is a little weird in that nothing's completely symmetrical, so this is just going to help you guide it all in. So the first pipe we're going to be starting with is this 4th electric, which is 5'3" from the back wall, and it's 10 foot long and 2'6" from center. So we're going to go back into Vectorworks, and I want to be on my plot layer, and I'm going to be drawing with a new class. So I'm going to actually start searching pipes, and I'm going to click the class that says 3D Theater Electrics Pipes. So now that's selected in my classes. In your tool sets, we have a lighting menu and we have a rigging one. Both of these we're going to use quite heavily this week. So I'm actually going to click rigging first. And the very first one that we have is something that's called the lighting pipe tool. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. When you select it, you'll notice that essentially you have a polyline tool. It just is gonna draw a lighting pipe instead. It works the exact same way as the polyline tool. So each additional click you make will start drawing a new set of lines. You can change it to being curved. There are none in this theater, but you can. And when you double click, that will finalize the pipe that you are drawing. So starting with our first pipe, we need one that is 10 foot long. So I'm going to start my line. I'm going to tab over on the length. I'm going to hit 10 foot, enter. I'm going to hold shift so it straightens it out so it's perfectly horizontal. I'm going to double click. So you'll notice a couple things. Yours may have actually populated differently. You can dictate the overall general shape and overall qualities and everything like that. For your line type, go ahead and have it as a double and keep it 2 inches in diameter. That's the size of a Schedule 40 pipe, which is the typical one we use in theater. The other thing that you'll see here is something that's called tick marks. Tick marks just kind of help you with additional snapping points along the lighting pipe tool. You don't need it if you don't want them. They're helpful for some people and they're not useful for other people, especially if you're not holding right to that 1'6" increment or 6 inches or whatever. So I'm going to turn mine off, but feel free to keep them on if you feel like it's useful to you. So here we have this lovely lighting pipe. We bounce back to PDF. We need to get it 5'3" from the back wall. So I'm going to move this over. And I'm actually going to use a tool that's called the Move by Points tool. If you haven't used this before, what this allows you to do is pick a snapping point. I'm going to click on the object with it selected, and then I'm going to click where I want it to end up. So now I've aligned the center of this lighting pipe to the back wall, and now I can use my regular modify move, which this needs to be -5'3". And then we also want to make sure that it's 2 foot away from center line. I'm using Move by Point tool over, and then I'm going to move it -2 foot on the X and 0 on the Y. So there we go. Here we have our first lighting pipe in the space. There's some other stuff that we need to establish for this. if you look over in your object info palette right now, the Z value, which is the height off of the ground, the height in 3D, right? That Z height is at 0 inches. That means the pipe is currently touching the floor. That's of no particular help to us. If you go back to that lighting pipes PDF, you can see that I gave you those Z values. So in this case, the Z of the fourth electric is 15 foot 8 inches off the ground. So I'm going to pop over back to Vectorworks, and with that pipe selected, 15 foot 8 inches. And even though nothing looks like it has changed now, this pipe is actually now 3D elevated to 15 foot 8. The other really useful thing to do at this point is to actually start to convert this object. You can do it after you name it or before, either way. I'm going to name it before because then it just fills in a little useful piece of information for me. So this is our fourth electric. I just hit enter to solidify that. Under the spotlight menu, object conversion, we're going to convert this to a hanging position. And when I select that, you notice that it says, please name this electric or this position. So because we already named it in the position name under object info, it's already pre-populated. If you didn't do that step before, just fill in what you need. Say OK. And then it asks, do you want to create a symbol from the selected geometry? This would be valuable in a very large theater with very standard sizes for his lighting pipes. Not so much in this one because, as we pointed out earlier, there's sort of all different shapes and sizes and stuff. So I'm going to say use geometry. And you'll notice even at that right away, we get some new information in our object info. There's some new features, including auto numbering. We'll get to that in a minute. And then we can also click or deselect show name, and we get this lovely little label for our fourth electric that we can drag around and manipulate as well. And just like every other thing in Vectorworks, the font is settable via this text menu with the object selected, so you can also make it a little bit bigger if you want it to stand out a little bit more, or smaller if it's standing out too much. One of the other things I tend to do is I tend to color my lighting pipes a little bit of a darker gray. The reason for that is we want to start really emphasizing the lights and the pipes as a part of this drawing. And for me and for my eye, that tends to help separate it from the background and from the scenery a little bit more on the page. Again, it's your preference. Don't do anything drastic and make it a crazy color, though. You do want this to show up well if it's printed in black and white. And we're going to work on our one more pipe together, and I'll let you carry on with the rest of them. So we're going to do the third electric now. This one is 28 foot long, half an inch. It's 8'5" from the back wall, and it's 11 foot 11 from the center line to the stage leftmost side. So I'm going to go back, lighting pipe tool, polyline. I'm going to make this 28 foot and half an inch. Holding shift to lock the horizontal, and double click to end it. I'm using the move by point tool just to drag it back over to the center line and the back wall. So I just snapped straight to that endpoint. It's 8'5" from the back wall. Negative 8'5". And since we already know that it's 11 foot 11 moving over towards stage left, we can actually populate this now as well. Say okay. Boop. And I'm going to turn off my tick marks. This pipe is also 15'8" off the ground. And this is the third electric. Spotlight, object conversion, convert to hanging position, third electric, use geometry. And there we have it. I'm gonna reestablish my gray fill because that's what I like. And I'm gonna set the size of my font up a bit and my font style to bold because that's also a style that I like. So go ahead and pause this video here and use the lighting pipes PDF to fill in the remainder of your positions. And I'll see you on the other side. So now that you have all of your positions in place and drafted, they all have Z heights, they're all set up as hanging positions, we're ready to actually start drafting and placing lights onto these pipes. Now we're going to be replicating a plot together to start. So also on the web course is this Dr. Ruth light plot. This is going to be our basis for what we're replicating together. You'll then take all these things and extend it off and start to do a light plot for your room next week. But we're going to start just by getting you used to how to go about doing all this. So we're going to start with the first front of house position. And if you look at the instrument key at the top right of the plot, you'll be able to see what each of these symbols means. So we're going to start. It's always great to start working off of center, especially when things are already dimensioned to the center line. So in this case, unit 15 or channel 15, unit 9, this first light, is a 36 degree that is 1'9" away from the center line. So you can do this in a couple different ways. You can go to the lighting tool set and select the lighting device tool. This is the lighting device insertion tool. From your navigation, you can actually select a symbol to place as a lighting device. Vectorworks takes a minute to think. This will open up your resource manager or small version of it, and you can select any symbol that you have within your file. Bringing your cursor on it, in this case 36, and you say select, and you can see I have this little ghosted out light that's following my cursor now. The other way you can get to this is if you just go up to your resource manager and you find your symbol. If it's a lighting device already and you double click on it, it's going to automatically open up that symbol with the lighting device insertion tool. So that's a really handy shortcut for this. So I'm going to go ahead and place this on my pipe at center. First click is position, so I click once, and second click will be my rotation. In this case, I want it pointed straight ahead, so I'm going to line it up so its angle is 90 and click its place. And there we have it. This light you can even see on the object info palette. It starts to, because we inserted a light onto a hanging position, it starts to actually assume some stuff for us. It automatically put that light at the correct Z height of our pipe, and also automatically assigned it to this first front of house position. So it's really handy, and that's where setting this kind of stuff up in advance really helps you. So this light still needs to move over. In this case, 1'9" off of center. So I'm going to move it 1'9" and say okay. Next light is also a 36 and it's 2 foot over. So in this case, I am going to, with my light selected, I'm going to duplicate it. And because I turned off offset duplications, that light is perfectly aligned with the one that I just drafted. So in this case, because it's perfectly aligned, I know that I can move it 2 foot. Just a very quick way to draft this up. So next light over 1'6", also a 36. So I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to move it 1'6". Next one is 2 foot, and then 2 foot after that. So I'm going to duplicate, move, foot, duplicate, move, 2 foot. So you can see how quickly this can start going, especially when you're replicating something. Our next light, so we just drafted unit 5. Our next one is going to be 1'6" over, and then another 1'6". Duplicate, move, 1'6", duplicate, move. I'll say there is a method to the possible madness that this looks like of where you place lights. We'll be going through that in prep for next week. Just know that like all of these are placed there for a reason and separated there for a reason, even though it looks a little bit arbitrary right now. So we just finished unit 3. Our next one is a new type. So we have 2 choices. It's 1'9" over from the previous one. So we can, in this case, we are looking for this high-end system Studio Spot 250. So in our resource manager, we can always double click on it. We could insert, or we can tab over and kind of give ourselves different ways to lock onto this. So I'm just gonna double click it onto the pipe, and then I'm gonna move it the 1'9" over that it needs to be. I'm going to show you another way just because it's a really handy thing that Vectorworks has built in. So I'm actually going to delete this. So we've been working with these Source 436s, right? So I can actually duplicate. I can move this the 1'9" again. And then in the object info palette, if I scroll down, there is a button that says replace lighting device. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And again, this opens up an instance of your resource manager. And from here, let's say you drafted something by mistake or you made a change and now this light needs to be something different. Any symbol that I either double click on or I select and then say select, it's going to change the light that I have selected or any number of lights that I have selected into that symbol type. And it also changes everything else about it too. You can see that it's changed the category that says instrument type and device type. So it's changed it from a regular light to a moving light, and it's changed all the wattage and everything like that. So really, really handy and useful. And then we have one last 36 that is 3'3" away from this moving light. So in this case, I'm going to do in reverse, duplicate, move 3'3". I'm going to replace my lighting device with a source 436 degree. There it is. So now we have 1/2 of this front of house pipe drawn. The thing that you're seeing here that's different than on the plot, right, is we don't have these center unit numbers, is what they're called. And we don't have these circles with the channel number in them either. Those are things, in addition to the color and the purpose that's listed here, those are things that you have the ability to determine the graphical layout for. There is an industry standard to this. Unit numbers always go in the center of the light, and channel numbers always go in a circle that's typically off to the bottom or to the side of the light that you have drafted. So the way Vectorworks handles these things is by way of something that's called the Label Legend Manager. You can find this in the Spotlight menu, Label Legend, and Label Legend Manager. When it opens, you'll notice that it says there are no items to show in this view. We actually need to create one. There are no stock ones that come with this. So we're going to say add. And for your legend name, you can fill in anything that makes sense to you. In my case, we're going to be making two of them. We're going to be making one for a light that's pointed straight on and one for a light that's pointed off to the side, so that, you know, the channel circle doesn't really like interfere with other things that may be drawn too closely. So we're going to create one. I'm going to call mine standard. You can call it default, you can call it whatever you want. In this column that says use in 2D, we want to go ahead and select unit number, purpose, color, and channel. You'll notice there's some other columns. There's one that's used in 3D. We won't be touching that this year at all. The number order doesn't really matter. Attribute, obviously. There's a column called write reading, which is handy. So this dictates whether when your light is rotated in a way, whether or not the text also rotates with that, or if it stays in a position where you're still holding the paper in the same place and the numbers are all oriented the same. In this case, we don't need to worry about write reading for any of these. We do need to worry about, though, that the channel needs to have a container type. It needs to be within a circle. So next channel, with it selected, if you click on the word that says none in container type, you'll notice that it changes. So the first one that pops up is circle. If you keep clicking through, there are other container types that are there as options. Each of them has their place and their use. So we want to go ahead and make sure that the container type for channel is circle. And then make sure you have a check mark on use layout symbol. And I suggest having one of the source 4 ellipsoidal lights. Probably the 36 is the cleanest one to have, but it doesn't really matter. But have one of those 4 as your layout symbol. And we're going to say OK. So you'll see that now we have one that's created, really. If I select it, all these other fields open up and I can edit 2D layout. So now we have a new menu and we get a representation of our fixture, of our symbol type. And then we get all of those different categories that we selected earlier as basically just text boxes. These text boxes automatically associate with that field in the object info palette for those lights. So in this case, we want to lay them out in a very particular manner. So we're going to click and drag unit number over, align it to the insertion point, middle of the light, and release. So now our unit number is in the center of the light. We're going to select and drag over top of the channel and the circle, and we're going to drag that over. I'm going to use snapping to kind of help me align it, and then I'm going to just kind of nudge it down using shift and down arrow, so it's just kind of right at the base of the light. It's all there. Color, I'm going to drag to the very end barrel of my light. So. And then purpose, I like to have along the left-hand side of the light. So I'm actually going to rotate this -90, so it's on its left-hand side. And I'm going to change the horizontal alignment to right. Actually, in this case, I should change it to left. And then I'm going to drag this over so it lays along the side of the light. Do a little bit of nudges. That looks pretty good. All of these are able to be resized just like you can with any other text blocks. I recommend that purpose and color you put down somewhere in like the 8 or 9 point. It's too many of these fields. Like if they they get too populated or you get too many of these going on at once, it can be hard to kind of pick out the key information that you need. For lighting, unit number and channel number are the most important, so you want to make sure that those are particularly emphasized. But all of these you can assign font selections if you have your own font that you're working with or that you like working with. You don't have to keep it in just Arial. You can also make decisions like, oh, I want the channel number to be bolded, for example, so that really extra stands out with this. Whenever you're done with laying these out, you can always come back. You say exit symbol. Again, you'll see that nothing has changed on our actual plot, but now we have that new label legend to work with. So I'm actually going to click and drag and select all the lights that I've drafted so far. You can also do this by clicking the magic wand tool that's like similar. And if you click on a light, it's going to select every lighting device that you have drafted so far. And I'm going to scroll down in Object Info, and we have a drop-down menu that says Use Legend. So I'm going to click on that drop-down, and you'll notice that legend that I just created is right there waiting for me. And I'm going to hit Standard. And now it has populated these circles for me. It's populated all that other information. It's just blank right now, but as I fill it in, it's R4215 plus R132, you'll see that that field is connected and it automatically starts to apply it. So we're going to keep drafting the rest of this pipe together. So we're going to pop back to this PDF. The next light is 9 inches over from center, so we're going to start working towards the stage right half of this. It is also a 36, so in this case I'm going to grab Object Info, or the lighting insert tool. I'm going to double click at center, insert my light, and I'm going to move it -9 inches. Next one is 6'6" from that. So I'm going to duplicate, so duplicate's in place, move -6'6". Next one is 2 foot. So I'm going to duplicate and move -2 foot. Duplicate it again. This one needs to move to 1'6". And you see I didn't actually get my duplicate in, even though I thought I did. So I'm just going to duplicate that and instead move it a positive 1'6" back, so I have that light in place where I needed it. Working on unit 14, so I'm going to duplicate again. Move. Nope. -1'6". And 1'9" away, we get the moving light again. So I'm going to move -1'9". I'm going to scroll down, replace lighting device, and select my studio spot. And then 4'3" away from that is another 36. So duplicate, move 4'3". I'm going to change that back to a 36 degree. I'm going to select all of those lights as well. I'm going to go ahead and apply my standard legend to them. The other legend we want to go ahead and create is one for when a light needs to be pointed as a side light and this channel bubble might get in the way. So like, for example, if I was to rotate this -90, you can start seeing how the legend could get potentially pretty crammed, especially if it goes the other way and it starts to overlap the other light. This can get pretty confusing, so we want to go ahead and get ourselves a tool for when that pops up later in the plot. I'm going to go ahead and derotate that. I'm going to go back to Spotlight, Label Legend Manager. And instead of saying add, I'm going to select my legend name and I'm going to say duplicate. I'm going to call this side. In this case, I want to make sure that any symbol that is using this legend, the unit number especially, can be read correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and select right reading on my unit number. And other than that, I'm going to make no changes. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to select side. I'm going to say edit 2D layout. So you see that because we duplicated that legend, we duplicated everything about it, including the layout of it. In this case, all we want to move is the channel bubble, because that tends to be the thing that pops out the most. Makes the fixture kind of extra long. So I'm going to select both the circle and the channel. You can click and drag over them. You can select one at a time and hold shift. I'm going to click and drag them so they're over here somewhere on the side of my light. You can just kind of line it up visually in some place that kind of looks good. Remember, the channel number is going to be sort of encapsulated inside that circle. So, and that looks pretty good to me. So I'm happy. I'm going to say exit. So now if I was to select one of my lights and I went down to use legend, I can actually hit the side one and it'll move those fields around for me as well. Now that we have our first front of house position drafted and it's accurate for the lights, we need to start implementing the unit number and the channel number and the purpose information, all those other things that you see on the plot. We're going to start with unit number because that's the easiest thing. So unit numbers with lighting, they always start on the stage leftmost unit of the pipe, and they go consecutively across the pipe. So this light is unit 1, for example. This light's unit 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. And you just count sequentially going up the pipe, across the pipe. For each position, you will have a unit 1 that if there's a light drafted on it. For each position, you restart over with unit 1, the farthest stage left-hand side. Or, yeah, farthest stage left side. Because we set this up as a hanging position, we have a really powerful tool just kind of ready and waiting for us. So select your position, not your lights. And if you look, there is starting number, increment, numbering direction, and a category called multi-cell numbering that's for cyc lights and what's called multi-cell fixtures. You don't have to worry about that on this plot, just know that it exists. For numbering direction, this is for auto numbering the pipe. So when you're ready, you can basically hit auto number and Vectorworks will take care of the unit number for you. The numbering direction is in paper directions, not stage directions. So in this case, bottom to top would be bottom of your page to top of your page, top to bottom is the inverse of that. Left to right would be page left to page right, which would be the equivalent of stage left to stage right, or right to left, which is stage left to stage right for us. So that's actually what we want to select. So page right, which is where this fixture is, towards page left, counting up, starting at 1. I'm going to hit auto number. As soon as I deselect my pipe, you can see that the unit number has been pre-filled in for me, and it's going sequentially up and across. If you have any numbers that are skipped, most likely you have a duplication that you made for a light, and it's trapped underneath of it. So just go ahead and delete one of those if that's the case that you find. So just do a visual scan, make sure you go sequentially all the way across. The other thing that we need to start putting in are these channel details. So you can see that this one is channel 12, this one's channel 1, channel 13. Channels are points of control. It's the way that the lighting designer and the programmer and the electricians are able to control the lights that are hung. There's a whole philosophy for how you channel stuff, or differing philosophies of how you channel stuff. But in this case, we just need to match this up. So we're going to start all the way on stage right. So you can always select the light, go into the object info, give its channel, hit enter, and you can see that it populates it in. In this case, we also need to get our purpose column, which is purpose goes to B, and its color is R119. And again, because we have those fields pre-done as part of our label legend, it starts to fill all that information in visually for us. 14 goes to C. Its purpose is C. And its color is also R119. And its channel is 13. If you already know which lights you need to select in order, you can actually use something that's called spotlight numbering to kind of quickly go through and be able to channel or reunit number or whatever. In this case, we're going to look at it for channeling 14 and 15. So just to show you an example of how powerful this is. So that's units 11 and 9. I'm going to go up to the spotlight menu and say spotlight numbering. You'll get a whole bunch of fields and a whole bunch of different settings. All these fields are all the fields available to your lighting devices. The check mark says what you're currently using. And when you're highlighted on it, the numbering options for that, so in this case, unit number is selected. So my options for unit number are populating over here. But we want to work with channel for now. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to put a check mark next to channel because I want to use that. And I want to start with 14 in this case because we've already channeled 12 and 13. You need to get 14 and 15. Increment by 1 is good. And with nothing selected, you can see that we don't get numbering directions or anything like that. It's stuck on something that's called manual. So I'm going to hit OK. And you see that we have a crosshair now again. When I hover that crosshair over a light, it turns red. That means that when I click on this light, or whatever light I click on, it's going to apply that spotlight numbering preference that we just selected. In this case, channel 14. So we want it to go on unit 11. Click once. You can notice that it automatically populated channel 14. And then I have a blue box that's hovering near my cursor now that says channel 15. That's letting me know that the next click I make is going to populate channel 15. So I'm going to click on unit 9. Turns into channel 15. And you can see that you can keep going with all this. When you are done, though, or you've reached the end of the numbering that you want to do, pick an empty space on your page, any empty space, and double click. And it'll get you out of that numbering, and it'll solidify these spotlight numbers, these channel numbers, or unit numbers, whatever you're doing with that tool, it'll solidify that. If you hit escape or you swap tools before you double click, it will assume that you didn't mean any of what you just did, and it will get rid of it all. So make sure you double click when you're finished, as long as you're happy. So now go through and you're going to be using this light plot PDF and you want to go through and you want to go ahead and draft all of these lights onto there. You can use the instrument summary that's up in the top right as sort of a clue in for which symbols you need to grab and when. Well, you want to fill in colors and purposes and channels and make sure that they're all going across and in the right dimensions and everything like that. So see you. For a couple of your lights, like for example, channel 52, 51 and 52 right here. There's an extra symbol that is at the very end of the light. That's something that we call an accessory. In the case of these lights, these are source 4 PARs, which have a soft feel to them, and they don't have the ability to cut down or shape that light beam at all, except by way of some accessories. So in this case, we have something called a barn door that you can see in your key as well, that's drafted on top of this. So Vectorworks has a way of dealing with these as well. If you go to Resource Manager, Accessories, you'll find a barn door symbol. If you double click on that, it looks very much like the lighting object insertion tool, right? We get the little barn door symbol following the cursor. But if you look down at your tool sets, we're actually in a new tool that's called the lighting accessory tool. What this does, and you can see the different modes that are available to you. You can apply this to a whole bunch of lights at once. You can apply it to one light at a time, or you can actually remove them also from a light using this tool. In this case, we want to apply it to channels 51, 52, 53, and 54 going across the stage. So I'm going to highlight channel 51 in red. I'm going to click, and you'll notice that it's automatically applying this symbol at what it thinks is the end of the fixture, which in this case is accurate. Sometimes this tool will make assumptions for you that are no good. In this case, it's set up to work really well for you. It's going to auto orient and everything. So all you have to do is click, slide, and go across. And when you're done, click back off of that tool, click to your selection tool. Another useful thing as you're drafting is, let's say you want to batch select a whole bunch of lights that have the same color and apply that all at once. You can. So, or similar properties. So I'm going to select, shift and select all of 12, 13, 14, and 15, which I know from the plot all have the same R119 gel color in them. And with all of those selected, you can see I have 4 lighting device objects selected. If I click in the color field, say R119, enter, it'll automatically apply whatever I just inputted in to all of the lights that I have selected. So you've now successfully drafted, dimensioned, channeled, unit numbered, labeled, colored, accessoried, all the lights that are on the plot, and matched it up perfectly. The last thing that we need to do, which by the way, on your, you still need to be putting this all into viewports. For example, I still have my scenery label, or my scenery layer grayed out. I have the light plot on for this page, I have the deck plot off, and I have theater architecture on. Just an example. So you have all this view ported, it's on your page, it should be in 1/2" scale. You should be using your 24 by 36 page size. The last thing that we need to do is we need to add in what's called the instrument summary, or the typical notation. What that does is that creates the box that you see at the top of right hand side of the light plot that you've been working with, that tells you what each symbol on this plot actually means and what it corresponds to and the type of light and other information about it. So that is also actually just a built-in tool already, which is really, really handy. So in your tool sets under lighting, there's a tool that's called the Instrument Summary tool. Before you click on it and insert it, there's one thing that you should just make sure you do, which is under Label Legend Manager. Make sure you have your standard or your default legend have a checkbox next to that calls it active. That applies it as your default as you're working, but it also sets up this instrument summary tool with a really powerful feature. So hit done. I'm going to click on the instrument summary tool, and you can see now I have a very large gray box that's just following me around. You can click anywhere on your plot and drop it in. Again, first click is position, second click is rotation. We don't want anything odd, so rotation angle of 0 is perfect. So you can see what it does by default is it drops in every lighting device symbol that you have in your file. It defines it, it gives it a wattage. It's basically summarizing that. It also, because we had that active checkbox in our label legend, it automatically applies our typical legend there as well. So the reader can see that where color, purpose, unit number, and channel all kind of correspond to on these lights that we have drafted. And it automatically also does a color summary for you based on the number of counts and things like that. If you want to rearrange your page to keep all of this information, you can. What is good practice, though, at a minimum, is to hide the unused types. We don't need to define types of lights that aren't on the plot. So that's a good place to start. The other thing is I don't like this color summary myself. I feel like it just overcomplicates it, and you can get that information in other places, both within Vectorworks and within other better lighting software for doing those things. So what I also do is there's this thing that's called build list. It's sort of innocuous up here at the top, but go ahead and click on it. And this is the entire component list. You can reorder all of this stuff. You can get rid of, like, if you don't like seeing the title of moving light there. This is very similar to obviously your publishing tools. When you're going to publish a PDF, you can move it back over and it'll get rid of it. You can move it back and you can see all of these different elements that you can kind of add in there. So for me, I actually like to get rid of the color summary and the line that goes along it. So I'm just going to select all of those. I'm going to move them off. I'm going to say okay. And that makes it a little bit smaller in this case with a little less information. So I don't need to worry about moving my stage left box near positions or like review porting those out or cropping them out and then putting them on another plate or anything like that. It just kind of summarizes it nicely. And obviously this can move anywhere on your page. The practice is that it should always be on the right hand side somewhere of your page, similar to the title block. It also can have any of its text altered. So if you decide, you know what, I really have this font that I'm really happy with and I keep working with, you can select it, you can rescale it up. So you can make all the text a little bit bigger if you need to. And you can see that it starts applying those changes. And I just Command Z because I didn't like it. The other thing to make sure of is that when you're inserting this, that you go ahead and make your symbols the same scale as your drawing. So in this case, because we drafted in 1/2 inch scale, which if you're ever in doubt, you can go back to your design layers, click on scale, and you can actually see that that the paper scale down here says 1 by 24. That's what half-inch scale is in this numeric form. So same like if I was to change this to quarter, you can see that it scales to 1 by 48. So you want this instrument summary to match that in terms of symbol scale. So in this case, because we drafted in half-inch, we want this number to be 24. It may have come in at 48. And so you can see how itty bitty those symbols are in comparison. You always want the symbols in your instrument summary to match in scale to the symbols that are drafted, just so it's really easy and sort of idiot proof for somebody who's reading the plot to not accidentally mistake one type of light for another. But that will be your deliverables for this week. You need the light plot fully drafted with title block correctly titled and scaled, instrument summary. You want all of your lights drafted with the color and the purpose, the unit number and the channel, all complete with a label legend to make that clear. And you're going to need 2 plates, one that is for your light plot, the stuff that's overhead, and your deck plot, for the 2 practicals. So practicals are things like table lamps, desk lamps, the way that we represent things that are not theatrical fixtures. If you look on page number 2 of your plot, if you didn't already, these 2 triangles, that is the standard. So in the future, when you're drafting something like a desk lamp or something like that for your room, that is a good go-to symbol for you to use as well.